starting now, so that we can make a report. And that will help us very much in making a report. I hope we will have a good interactive discussion this afternoon. Please feel free to make your contributions. If you would like to be reflected in the report, please include your full designation so that we, or your email so we can contact you and make sure that our report is complete. There are a few amendments to the program. Our moderator, Abidemi, is unfortunately held up, but he has sent in his questions, which I shall include in the chat. And our colleague, Irene Donjio, is unfortunately ill, and we wish him a speedy recovery. So those are the, our main medium of communication, of course, will be the chat. So put in your questions, contributions into the chat. There will be a poll that Armand and Samira will be running. Again, we shall respond to the poll questions in the chat. So that's going to be our main medium of expression. The central issue we're looking at this afternoon is the question of developing employable skills in our young African graduates. The historical legacy of grammar type schools in many African countries has led to a surfeit of graduates with a lot of theory-based knowledge to the detriment of the competencies and skills urgently needed by a rapidly expanding African economy. Here in the Netherlands, universities of applied sciences provide technical and vocational education that is driven by the competencies and skills needed by the professional labor market. So in Africa and in the Netherlands, we feel that we can learn from each other's experiences, and we believe there are lessons to be learned and shared. As several African governments are now also trying to bridge this gap in TVET education. In this afternoon's panel, we would like to explore how a focus on TVET education can impact and engage young Africans, young students. And with this in mind, which best practices of institutional collaborations between Europe and Africa may serve as stepping stones to increase impact? Are there examples of successful collaborations? What is needed in terms of education, stakeholder engagement, policy, and business planning? So those are the kind of questions I hope we can look at this afternoon. And I'm delighted to welcome our panel that brings on board a variety of perspectives on how to leverage the interface between entrepreneurs, industry, community, and the classroom. So with that brief introduction, it is a great pleasure to welcome our first speakers. This is Samira Safar and Armand Gaikema from NAFIC, a Dutch agency that is charged with the internationalization of education, and they will speak to this themselves. So without much ado, Samira and Safar, the floor is yours. You have about 20 minutes, and I shall try and keep everyone to time so we can get through what and give everybody adequate opportunity to participate to this discussion. So thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Abiola. I hope I'm audible for everyone in the room. Thank you all for joining us today on this Friday afternoon or evening, depending on where you are, or maybe even morning if you're more up west. NAFIC is a partner of the African Knows Conference with good reason. We believe that in the theory of decolonizing the mind, it starts with our own reflections on our own actions. And NAFIC has been part of the, as the old would say, the capacity strengthening efforts of the Dutch policy since 1952, so that's almost 70 years. But we would rather say that we are looking at co-creating with all our partners across the world in how we can make education more accessible and better for all, whilst also dealing with curriculum reform and innovation of education. In terms of TVET, there is so much to be done when it comes to the African continent, but also in parallel with what's happening in other countries as well. Agriculture in itself, within the agriculture TVET perspective, remains a critical component of livelihoods in Africa, and especially engaging in youth. Engaging youth in agricultural education and training is key to accelerating sustainable growth. So that's why we as NAFIC are very happy that we can align with the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs on their Youth at Heart strategy on how to incorporate more youth into education solutions. And especially in TVET, there is so much to be gained, a world to be gained, I would say. And in the session of today, we highlight a few of the best practices, but also examples from our own history. My colleague Arman Gaikema will gladly inform you a bit more about that later. But I would like to take you a bit through to what we think, and it's a way paving the way for what Arman's going to say and the discussions that we will have today later on, in a few of the recommendations that we already see looming on the horizon. And one of it is increasing collaboration, not just between universities and TVET institutions, but also between knowledge partners across continents, but also across countries and bilateral countries, so on all levels. It's also about increasing collaboration on policy levels. So how do we make sure that national policy is aligned with education policy, but also how foreign partners such as NAFIC can add to that without adding our own voices, because it's also about strengthening the TVET institutions themselves and students themselves. With this, we also have in mind how to increase private sector development and involvement so that students are integrated, the student view is integrated from the get-go, from the way they start with their internship or with their program up until they reach the marketplace themselves in terms of learnability and employability, because both are of equal importance. And when we talk about equality, we also talk about the inclusion of more women in the curriculum. So not just gender mainstreaming or reshaping the gender balance that exists, but also empowerment of all people that are involved. And we are talking about women and girls, but also marginalized groups and those who are disenfranchised. So those are the few recommendations that I already would like to allude to. But I think our discussions of today will take us much deeper and into depth into what TVET and this transformation can entail. Starting off with a more practical side of the NAFIC perspective is Arman Gaikema, who I would like to give the floor. Arman is my esteemed colleague who is responsible for NAFIC activities in a great region of Sub-Saharan Africa. And he has vast experience when it comes to impact assessments and monitoring and evaluations, but also he is knowledgeable on TVET in a broad sense. So the floor is yours, Arman.
Thank you very much, Samira. Thank you also for your lovely words about my experience. I can say the same for you. You also are a very good help for NAFIC and for my own team as program officers. Communication about results is very important. I would like to share with you a screen with my PowerPoint presentation. I will use a presentation to highlight a bit more about the experiences and also insights that NAFIC has gained during its history of dealing with management and administration of capacity development programs, also dealing with strengthening of TVET. Is my presentation now also open on your screens?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me just do the presentation.
Sorry, just a quick housekeeping rule. Can we all put off our microphones for the duration of this presentation, and we can put them on later?
Thank you, Abiola. I was not yet disturbed by any background sound. I hope you can also hear me well. As Samira was telling already, I work for NAFIC. I have already quite some experience in working as a program officer. NAFIC has been administrating quite a history of capacity development programs and scholarship programs, supporting education and training in focus countries that are related to the development collaboration programs of our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In fact, this ministry is our main commissioner. They are the ones that finance also now the current capacity building program managed by NAFIC, the Orange Knowledge Program. But I also take examples of earlier predecessor programs when I show you the experiences and insights of NAFIC. It is important to state that NAFIC is already taking care for a long period, more than half a century, I would say, dealing with strengthening programs, supporting education and training institutions in African countries, Asian countries, Latin American countries. But TAVET is becoming more and more also a pillar of this support. If you look at the 1990s, there we started already supporting polytechnics and universities of applied sciences, but we have more or less two different levels of interventions. Those dealing with projects, nowadays they are more and more partnership projects, Dutch institutions supporting Southern institutions in the educational domain. But also we have this modality called the tailor-made training modality, which provides more on a short-term support, providing specialized courses with a customized approach for several weeks. Now, if you look at the way NAFIC has been helping countries to enhance their own TAVET provision, you can see we have three levels of intervention. There is the intervention of type supporting organizations and the development as a TAVET institution, supporting training colleges, supporting polytechnics, supporting TAVET providers in enhancing the quality of content, enhancing also the quality of teachers, helping them with curriculum development processes. There is another type of intervention that is really related to the tailor-made training programs, providing informal short trainings for beneficiaries like NGOs, government entities, but also small and medium scale enterprises, where we really look into knowledge deficits that can be tackled, covered by a short training of a few weeks. And then we have also a level of intervention that is much more structurized, focusing on national developments, targeting especially key organizations responsible for the regulation and the policy development of all kinds of vocational and professional education. That can be supporting the establishment of a national qualification framework, strengthening also accreditation mechanisms, introducing all kinds of methodologies that deal with more effective vocational training delivery. Now, we have come across in our projects for a number of methodologies, whether it be problem-based learning, student-centered learning, professional-oriented higher education. Well, they're all titles and naming, but the practical basic aims were always how to be more labor market responsive with your educational approach. Looking at the way we have been supporting TAVET in a very concretized picture, you can say that almost half of our projects now help TAVET with certain ways of improvement. The general aim is always how to make this transformation possible from a classical theoretical way of learning to a much more problem-based learning that is really focusing on practical orientation, relating also to needs expressed by employers in the labor market. In it, we also follow a clear integral approach where we try to have a holistic pathway, educational pathway, starting from increasing access to good quality TAVET, improving the content of this TAVET delivery, and helping also to improve the access and the integration to the world of work. Elements that you can see then that are taken care of in these projects and tailor-made training programs is, well, increase an up-to-date curricula, equip also institutions with more facilities, be also more outward oriented, create the linkages in a structural way with private sector entities and employers and government partners, help also to improve the quality of teachers. What you see then as important concrete examples is the strengthening of apprenticeships, increasing also the integration of practical events, help also to create a curricula that provides clear attention for the learning, the capacitation of students with life skills, entrepreneurial skills, ICT skills, but also to help them, because many of them have to find their own employment. The formal sector is not providing sufficient vacancies. You can see that there is a huge need for creating self-employment, and for that we also focus on the creation of incubators, helping students to gain experience through business challenges, training colleges. But also, yeah, that's also something that needs to be said. Employers and those in the labor market always say students need to have a clear basic level of skills in financing. How to deal with finances, it remains one of the major needs within TAFET education. A short overview of what we have come across as challenges within TAFET. I'm sure many of you also have the same experiences. African countries face already for consecutive numbers of years economic development, 4, 5, 6% economic growth is not an exception for African countries. It leads also to an increased demand for skilled laborers, skilled graduates. But what you see then also is that the supply of TAFET education, the access to this TAFET education is limited. You don't have much formal skill training possibilities. There is also a mismatch between training and jobs that are required. This leads also then to a process again that many young people have to learn all their capabilities, all their skills on the job. There is clearly a vicious cycle where you see then also that this shows poor quality of services again, a low productivity, and that you also see that people coming from this TAFET system, the graduates, they are affected with an attitude of low self-esteem. You see also relatively low starting salaries for TAFET graduates, also if you compare this with academic graduates. And the whole system is also affected by a high dropout rate, not only from TAFET students, but also from lecturers and mentors that find also greener pastures in commercial domains where they can find jobs with higher salaries. Now, in all those projects and trainings that we have been implementing together with our implementing partners, it's not NAFIC that is implementing themselves through tender processes, through matching. We always make use of Dutch partners. These are higher education institutions, consultancy bureaus, but also more and more TAFET institutions, Dutch TAFET institutions. Now, the lessons that we have aggregated from our experience are as follows. More and more we realize as NAFIC that that together with the way we have been setting up and organizing Africa-Europe institutional partnerships, we also have to relate this to what we call an intra-African mobility, meaning that TAFET institutions, African TAFET institutions, should also learn from each other. That we also facilitate this through our partnerships and through our projects, so that this South-South collaboration synergizes with African-European collaboration. A second learning experience is also, and well, everybody knows, of course, and this is a cliche already among all the TAFET experts, that the private sector should participate in the development of TAFET curricula. But what you still see is that it is done in an anecdotic way. It is donor-driven. As long there are funds available, institutions and TAFET institutions in Africa can do this. But if support falls away, you see that also it is not structured again. It is not formalized in the way they deliver their curricula, in the way it has also been integrated into quality standards. And this needs to be done more. The structurizing and formalizing they're working together with the private sector. Also, the integration of innovations that have already been applied on a large scale, whether it be in the agro-food sector or in logistics or in ITC, it is important that as soon an innovation takes off, it should also be part and parcel of the educational package. Lecturers and students should also then be exposed to these innovations. It should be taught and also at the level of TAVET institutions as soon as possible, so that it can also be widely applied and it can also be used again by graduates, so that they can also make them very useful in industries and enterprises, showing also clear knowledge and comprehension of these innovations. Another very important insight, NAFIC is responsible also to show impact to its own government. It's also important for our own accountability. How can we also show impact? One of the instruments is that we also focus on TAVET teacher training programs, meaning that those who have to stand in the classroom, in the workshops, as instructors, as mentors, as teachers, also require improved skills. They need to know how to deal with new methodologies of competence-based learning. In that way, you can also improve the access of youth to better quality training, better quality technical business-oriented training, that in the end will also improve their job perspectives again. Now, for NAFIC, inclusive development is also more and more important, I think, for everyone here dealing now, participating in this workshop. Inclusive development related to the sustainable development goals. If you look at this inclusiveness for NAFIC, it's not only important to be gender sensitive, but also to concretize this and how to improve the participation of young women graduates. Dealing also with aspects like how is training college or a polytechnic dealing with childcare? Do you have also reproductive health mobility facilities? Another aspect is, do you also pay attention to the way young entrepreneurs, young women entrepreneurs have access to capital or decision-making powers with regard to investments and earnings? Very important also to deal with this already in your TAVET education pathways. And the last one is that more and more we realize that if you want to make TAVET education or the whole system of vocational training attractive for youth, and that they also become a skilled workforce that can accelerate innovations, you need to have a better linkage, a better collaboration between universities and technical and vocational training institutions. These two very important players in the whole educational column can mean much more for each other if they work together in research, in the dissemination of results, and also in the way you have to reform vocational training modules. I have two examples, and I go shortly through them, but I think these are very inspiring results that we have already delivered in our own programs. One of them is the Kenyan example. It is a project supporting the East African Regional Network on dairy training. It is implemented by a combination of Dutch and African universities of applied sciences. ARIES is the consortium partner from the Dutch side, and they are working together with Ethiopian, Kenyan, and Ugandan partners at polytechnic and vocational training level. One of their major results that they envisage, and they already come across a long way in establishing a digital learning platform, is that they provide blended learning modules at certificate and diploma level, where in this platform they can work together also in applying it to their local context. They can also change the modules themselves. They can also make use of all kinds of technical and practical training assignments for students. It's all provided on the platform. They can adapt it also together with TAVET trainers and private advisory services. There's a facility in this platform that makes it possible also to change curricula to local context and also improve it again based on experiences when dealing and providing these modules. So it's really interactive and dynamic. And it also is a very good way of addressing all the new tendencies related to COVID restrictions, that you have to provide also TAVET modules more and more in a digital surrounding. Another example is what we have already been developing, and it's a project implemented already for 5 years, is the Strengthening Education for Agriculture Development, called SEED. This project brought together 3 entities. It's a very nice example of what we call this triple helix model here, of bringing together government, TAVET providers, and also representatives of the private sector. And they have made a link also in this project to extension service training, important for agriculture. In Rwanda, this is typically done by the government. It's still a public responsibility. Now, what you see here, this is a very good example how agriculture vocational training institutions, polytechnics, and the University of Rwanda have come together in reforming also all kinds of entrepreneurship, extension service training modules, and agricultural modules in a way that it is also very relevant for their own agricultural sector. It brought together also new insights, how to set up value addition, agricultural processing, and important agricultural production processes relevant for Rwanda into educational and vocational training programs. What you see, for example, as a very good concretized result was that teachers and lecturers were brought to farmers and farmer support organizations in a number of meetings where they could also see how farmers were dealing with soil erosion, soil management, irrigation, using all kinds of varieties, how to deal with seed qualities. It learned them also how farmers in Rwanda were dealing already with all kinds of innovations, and they could immediately also expose students with this new knowledge on the actual agricultural development that was taking place in Rwanda.
Sorry to interrupt, but Armand, if you could begin to wind up.
This is my last slide. So this is what I would like to say. These are 2 examples of how we tried also into bringing into practice our lessons learned. There are much more examples, and I'm sure also that the coming panelists will also bring very nice examples. But it is also how to aggregate in the lessons that we have learned and share it with each other. There is one poll question which I would like to share with you, and I'm sure Samira can help me with this. She has set up this poll question.
Yes, thank you, Armand. Also, thank you for elaborating on our NAFIC approach to TVET. Because we had the aim when designing this this session for today is to engage with the audience, you being the bearers of knowledge as well, as much as possible. So we thought about asking you the question about what you consider to be the main challenges for TVET in your country. So please sound off in the chat, fill in the answer, or maybe a different kind of approach that you would like to see. We're very curious to see, and maybe these topics can come back as we guide ourselves through the rest of the session. So if you think that the main challenge is the mismatch between supply and demand, we'd like to hear more, or maybe the low quality and ineffective training, as Armand already mentioned. The very much theoretical approach instead of the practical approach. That's something that we have also mentioned before in Armand's keynote. So let us hear, let us know. And back to you, Abiola, and we'll get back to these challenges, I think, throughout the entire session. Thanks, Armand, as well.
Thank you for such a brilliant start to our discussions. And I really would hope that many people will respond to this poll. So I'm just going to blather on for a second or two to give you a chance to put in your response, because I think it will be very good to get your feedback. Which of these do you consider to be the main challenges? And I encourage everyone to, I can see some people are putting in their responses. Let us have your feedback on this point before I move away from this slide. So while I'm introducing Diana, can you keep your slide up, please? And then I hope by that time we will have more responses to this very good question that you have posed to the to the audience. It's my great pleasure to welcome our second speaker. Diana van der Stelt is the co-founder and director of Maxim Jansa IT Solutions. This NGO intends to create a career perspective for young Africans in IT. And it includes training young IT engineers from underprivileged backgrounds on bringing integrated IT solutions to African schools. And well, I will leave Diana to make further introductions because I understand she's also here with a team. So we're looking forward to your very practical perspectives on this TVET issue. So Diana, the floor is yours. I think at this point you may want to share your screen, and I would like to say a big thank you to Samira and Armand for this great start to our afternoon discussion. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let me start by saying that I'm very happy to be here, and it's important to state that I'm here as the Dutch co-founder of the Maxim Jansa Foundation, but I'm here indeed with a team. My fellow or co-founder Stanley Kwachidanchira, who is our director in Accra, and Ibu Kamara, who is our country director in the Gambia, and also responsible for a vocational training program that we have been launching together with him. And I'll be very happy to invite my colleagues also to take the floor in a panel discussion. They're all daily on the ground, and I'm also half-time on the ground in West Africa, while also helping to launch collaboration between these African schools, our own training programs, and partners in the Netherlands, being Universities of Applied Science, University of Utrecht and Twente, and also a number of companies that sent us their ICT professionals to train young IT graduates to prepare them for the job market. So we have a lot of partnerships between the Dutch and the West Africans, Ghana and some other countries where we've also started to operate recently. So I'm here with my two colleagues, and I'm sure they will come in with this discussion. And yeah, I think one of the discussions I had with Abiola when we prepared for this meeting was, why does Africa need a learning transformation, as we call it? We think that there is a gap between the job market and what people find in their educational system. And we see that there is a lot of youth unemployment in Africa, and that the current educational system is not sufficiently helping to equip students with what we call 21st century skills. And we think that interactivity is one of the key factors there. It's very important to have an interactive and activating way of learning rather than having a talking head in front of a blackboard that is giving you a lot of information that you can then learn by heart and reproduce without even knowing if you understand. And yeah, I think that is, if that is happening from basic school, later on when people move on to either university or vocational programs, that is also not helping them. So students get not enough opportunities to get practical experience and very little attention to what we call soft skills, which can be ICT skills, but also collaboration, communication with others, time management, and so forth. So yeah, a few quick pictures that are part of our learning philosophy. It is about the different learning styles. We all know from science that there is that people learn in different ways. You have people who learn in a visual way, or by reading, or by writing, or by seeing, or by doing. And they all have different styles of getting acquainted to what the content of the curriculum. And the learning should actually take into account these kind of differences. I've been in a school board in Netherlands, and we had all these discussions about boys and girls, and why the girls are doing so well in the Netherlands in the high schools and the boys are terrible. And it's also partly based on this, that learning styles may be different between boys and girls, and then especially teenage boys can suffer a lot from a very typical high school approach. And they're just, too much moving and active to sit down and listen to the teacher. So that's not helping them. So we think There should be all kinds of ways of learning and taking into account these different styles. We also know there's just a few learning theories that I show here, like the Bloom's taxonomy, but also, you know, the level of learning and the level of really understanding something, whether you read something or you hear it or you see it or you hear and see it or you actually do it. And each time you have when you actually have an active way of practicing what you learned, you see that people remember and they also deeply understand what they have learned, rather than just memorize it and then rehearse something on an exam. I can talk a long time about the experience we have with even very high-grade graduates from the university, like KNUST, one of the best technical universities in West Africa, honor students, and they come to our program and you ask them very basic questions, and after 2-3 questions you just realize that they don't really know, though they have passed that class with a very high grade. So they've just memorized the book and wrote the exam, but they don't really know how to apply it. And that's a problem, including also things like critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communications, what we call these soft skills that should also be part. Everyone who goes to the job market knows that these things are important if you go into the workplace. So if you take these things together, we think that learning should be different from the traditional way of putting a teacher or a professor in front of a blackboard, and it should hold all these different things, the learning styles, the different ways of helping people to energize and to practice, and also these soft skills, as we say. So we have developed an integrated approach for 3 levels of students: school children, high school graduates, and that is where the vocational training comes in, the TVET, and also for university graduates. So we have our learning transformation program, we have our vocational training for hardware and electronics repair, and Ibu Kamara, who is in our panel today, is also leading that training center and has a lot of experience with the same philosophy, like how that works for that target group. And then we have boot camps for ICT graduates in different domains, where we try to add up to the current university curriculum in West Africa with all these things that we think are lacking. We put them into a 4-month boot camp to help people to catch up with these deficiencies, so to speak. So when it comes to the schools, I think we feel that's very important, because we think that is the foundation. We can work a lot with brilliant young IT graduates, of those who have made it through senior high school, but it also starts with the basics, right? If you have a good foundation in a basic school, primary and junior high school, that will help you to also proceed in life and even make it to these tertiary education. Or you will get stuck maybe when you're 14 or 15, you will get out of school without any certificate, and you'll just be basically unemployed. So we do different things like equipping the teachers, introducing them to multimedia teaching practices, and there we also believe that the ICT helps a lot. And we bring in hardware and networking into the schools as well. And software, of course, we have this individual learning management software and school management software. And recently we also started a digital library for Africa, where we are putting in learning content for schools, teachers, and also ICT professionals for our partners all over the continent to use. That will be like quality open source learning materials, because we feel that it should not make any difference whether you are born in a rich or a poor family to have access to quality education. And then we help schools also to implement all these different innovations over the years. So we never talk about ICT as such. We talk about learning transformation. We think ICT can help teachers and also the children to get these skills, but it's more of an attitude and a capacity to lifelong learning than having a machine in front of you. The machine is a tool to that. And yeah, I think we have been very successful. We started in 2016, and last year we won an international award at the Internet Governance Forum in Berlin from the United Nations for our contribution to digital transformation in Africa. And I think the fact that we are very interactive, very practical, but we also that we integrate all these different components in our program are key factors there. And then, of course, we also try to be very frugal. We basically are professional beggars, as one of my colleagues would say. We just try to get everything for free, keep things affordable, so we can easily also distribute it and share it among our new partner organizations in different countries and cities. And which is also very important, I think, is we are evidence-based. Just last week, we had very successful event where our Maarten Smulders, our master student from the University of Utrecht, ICT for Development, graduated with an A+ in his research for us to make an impact assessment methodology to measure the impact of our interventions in the school system in West Africa. And that is, I think is going to help us to even improve more in the future when we see exactly what is working and not working, and collect that information consistently in all our projects. So yeah, we have done that together with the University of Utrecht Business Informatics Department, and we did a trial this year. It was difficult because schools were closed because of the pandemic, but in the coming year, we'll have a new project with them and with one of their master students. And we are going to implement this methodology fully in all our projects. So yeah, so currently we have Bootcamp Training Center for Young University Graduates in Accra in Ghana. And then we have a Vocational Training Center in Banjul in the Gambia. And then we have schools with learning transformation programs all over Ghana. Support foundations in the Netherlands and Belgium, where we also collect hardware. A lot of people give us their end-of-life cycle hardware machines that are still very good. And we ship hundreds of them with containers to West Africa to take them to these schools for a second life. And then at the moment we are opening up new country offices in Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and South Africa. So we're really moving fast, and because we've set up our whole concept as a sort of a franchise, it's yeah, it's easy to copy. So we are currently copying the concept of Ibu Kamara in Gambia to Ghana to set up a vocational training center there in various cities. And then the school project we've done successfully in Ghana can also be implemented in the Gambia, because we think the school system is similar. In ECOWAS, there is a harmonized educational system. So what works in Ghana can also then work in the other ECOWAS countries. So today you find Stanley Kwachi, Danshira, Ibu Kamara, and myself on the panel. And that's it.
Fantastic.
I'm sure there's a lot more you want to say, Ibu, if Abiola would even allow you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for this very interesting introduction to your integrated approach. And I have our moderator had sent in some questions, and I'll just ask one of them and add my questions to that. You spoke about an evaluation, and I wonder whether you have any preliminary findings about the impact of this integrated approach. And are you an outlier, or is this the beginning of a new approach here? Is Maxime Jansa an outlier, or are you aware of similar initiatives, of other initiatives that are now being inspired by what you are doing? So I'll just throw in the last question from Abidemi Olatunbosun. He says, can you just kind of outline very quickly the threats and opportunities with respect to building capacity and ICT knowledge transfer that you have gained from this, your experience on the ground? So, and please, anyone else who has questions, throw them in the chat. or put up your hand and you can. So we have about 10 minutes to discuss.
Yes.
So
yes.
the floor is yours.
Shall I, Abiola, give it a short shot and then give the floor to my colleagues to also come in?
Yes.
I think when you ask about the impact, I think we see a few things. We are, of course, monitoring our programs. And I think for the professional training, it's sort of simple because the question is, are they having a job? We have like 50-60% youth unemployment in our target group, which are young graduates from underprivileged backgrounds. And then when they come to us, it's like 90%, 95% of them finding good jobs, quality jobs in their field. And we follow all of them all the time. So that's easy. I can pick a phone and ask them, where are you right now? I'm a software developer for Ecobank in Accra. Then the program has been successful because that guy from a small village in Eastern region is now in a quality job with a bank. Then there is, of course, the exam results. When it comes to the high school programs, we can see that there is a strong increase in exam results when people start to be a part of our programs. And I'm sure Stanley can tell you more about that. And we also see secondary effects in the communities. Actually, when we take the computers to the schools in deprived areas, often it's the first time that computers come to this village. And then you see that the whole community is sort of over the top. They are extremely happy, partying because we are there and so on. But basically, they feel that the 21st century has come to their place and that they are no longer sort of left out. People get angry, they start to call Vodafone multiple times to get proper internet in their town and so on. People start to buy smartphones. So you actually see that we sort of have a sort of a spin-off effect where we see that once the teachers are using the laptops and are using ICT in the school, then it is sort of impacting their environment and their families, and then everyone is sort of gets infected and starts to use IT. If that's only wasting your time in the evening on Facebook, I don't always know, but I think we see that type of changes, and we want to follow up more to see, because I think once people get access to internet, they get access also to all the information in the world basically for free, sometimes nonsense, but also very, way to get good information, and that is going to change your life in a very significant way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so this is about the impact, and then I think when it comes to challenges, I think I posted a few. Oh no, you asked if we are an outliner.
Yes.
I think in a way we are. Stanley may come, and he's currently on a radio show on Sunday afternoons on the national radio in Ghana, having angry discussions about the system there. But I think so in a way, compared to the official government system, we are an outliner for sure. But there's a lot of people who agree with us. And yeah, since we've been in the media and also winning this international award, everyone is calling us. And Ibu Kamara is an example. He was also an outliner, but in doing exactly the same as we did, but then in the Gambia. So we decided to join, and there's more people even, I think, maybe listening to this conference right now who are starting Maxim Jansa branches in other places. So once we tell our story, a lot of people agree. So we just, pray that this will be the start of a major change, and that's what we firmly believe it should be. Not because it's Maxim Jansa, but because we think this is how it is.
Well, thank you for sharing, your experience. And I wonder whether Mr. Kamara has anything to add to what Diana has said.
Yeah, thank you very much, the whole and Diana, for that wonderful, fantastic presentation. Yeah, it's true. Our program in Gambia and the Maximianza program in general in West Africa, the design is unique. And what we are trying to do in terms of vocational skill training program, our method is hand-on-deck training. I'm seeing the mismatch that they're talking about, mismatch in skill training and job sector that has been really demonstrated and is evidence-based in Africa. So we have known those things, and that's what we are trying to do. Right now, our training programs inculcate training of young entrepreneurs with skills that they can use, they can be employed or create employment for themselves. Our perspective in Gambia, the vocational skill training model that we want to put in Gambia with Maximianza in Gambia, we're trying to make one that would be one of the best, because the model increase skill training program and then combined with entrepreneurship development training program attached. This is not like only training them on computer-based training, but we use computer-based training also blended with entrepreneurship so that they can employ themselves, particularly in the sector of agriculture. We're looking at the eggs that we consume in Gambia, Africa, chicken that we eat is from outside, the vegetable we eat, most of them even are not grown in our country. So you have a camp that you build a vocational training center, training young people with ICT knowledge, and then also train them to become an entrepreneur. Either they could just become poultry breeders, and then you attach that in the training package. So you train them on that way. Later time, they will be in their farm producing eggs. So they would have that blended in. The restaurant would be there, supermarket would be there. The supply should come from the people that are already within the training center, supply those sectors. That is the concept that we are trying to do. We've looked at the youth that we targeted the Maximianza training from age 6, age 6, and train them with a campaign to bring computers to all school. In Gambia, almost about 95% of the schools in public schools don't have computer access. Our campaign to bring the computers to those schools to train them from that age 6 until they get to grade 12, that would bring a lot of changes in the life of 3 years in the Gambia. They train from grade school up to grade 12, complete schooling, and then they think of going to vocational school. After grade 12, that would be the first time for some of them to even sit in front of a computer. When would that person finish, get skills on that one and think of getting a job? That is the dilemma. And most of the schools also, vocational schools also, doesn't have their own design syllabus. I am still, get worried that they still have external examinations. External examination method. The syllabus will be designed outside, send it to them. The teachers just teach that tailor-made syllabus for them and teach them theoretically, print certificate, and just give them. That is a dilemma too. This is what the drive we are trying to look at and then create our own perspective. You're teaching somebody like a mobile phone repairs. In the Gambia, I looked at when I came from the UK, I came to the Gambia. Population is about 1.5 million if you calculate it with the population, with the foreigners. Everyone minimum has 2 mobile phones. If it is 1.5, you multiply 1 point by 2, that's about 5 million mobile handsets. The tears and wears in the country is high. It's either the audio or the microphone or the screen just got cracked. These are factors that we need. So if you are training them, you train them on the basis of that. So when you are going to teach them how to do that, you have to teach them to take note of the steps that they've taken to solve that problem. That becomes a training manual. Instead of copying and pasting of somebody's training manual outside and start training children. This is the evidence-based training program that we want to do, market-led. Some of the people in the high street don't have certificates, but they repair mobile phones. They repair a watch in the high street. They make a living of it. Why should our vocational skills be only close to only on the theoretical teaching than market-led driven training program? That is our approach. So we're looking at some of them who go to university, like Diana say, complete university with a high grade, come out, and he cannot even wheelbarrow, they cannot fix. And they say engineers, even wheelbarrow is important. Those are the kind of scenarios that we've been seeing. So we are trying to address those kind of problems so that if you are an engineer in that particular sector, you will be able to produce something that the African market would gain. Even toothpick in Africa, toothpick, imagine, is being imported. We have banks everywhere. I said it in Ghana.
Thank you.
So these are some of the things that we wanted to share. And then what Diana said, we can look at those thematic issues that our market needs, train our people, that tailor-made programs, and then move on in that direction. I'm so.
No, thank you very much, because you paint a very sobering picture. I can't put it in any other words. It's a very sobering picture, but I guess it is one that needs to be stated. We need curricula to be evidence-based. We need
Exactly.
curricula to be market-led. And
Yeah.
how do we do that? And it's good to see what Maxime Jansa is doing as a model. So thank you very much for this very interesting I must confess, rather sobering presentation. It is what it is, but we need to identify the problem to be able to go towards solutions. And we really look forward to your sharing with us the outcomes of this impact and evaluation assessment that you are doing. Thank you so much, Maxime Jansa.
Thank you.
And I think that is a very, very good bridge to our next speaker, Mr. Abiodun Adenuga, Odunuga, my apologies, Odunuga. He's an international development consultant, project manager for the Nigeria-France Initiative, NFTI, launched by the Embassy of Nigeria in Paris, to serve as a multi-stakeholder platform to strengthen the tech ecosystem between both countries. He's also adjunct faculty at the College of Management and Information Technology of the American International University, and he's a member of the Management Board of SDG's Africa Independent Assessment Initiative. He comes well with a background that can give us some insight onto how to leverage entrepreneurship support organizations to maybe cheer us up a little bit after listening to Diana and Ibu Kamara. And let us hear from you, Abiodun Odunuga, at this point on this topic. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abiola. Thank you for the opening remarks. It's a pleasure to be here. And I want to also say thank you to Amanda and also Diana and Ibu Kamara for the justice they've done. I feel you've already set up the tone for, taking this further. I'm involved in different things, as just Dr. Abiola has mentioned. I wear like 4 caps. I do development practice, things that borders around the SDGs. I'm also very involved in entrepreneurship as a consultant to many stakeholders who are involved in supporting young entrepreneurs in Africa. And I'm vested also in education. I'm a lecturer and I also train students across Africa. And I also wear the diaspora cap. I co-founded Friends of Nigeria, which is one of the foremost diaspora organizations headquartered in France. And we leverage on diaspora prowess to be able to, solve local problems in the country. So I'll move strictly into my slides. And then, yeah. Okay, can you see my slides? Not yet?
No, yeah, it's coming up. Yeah, fantastic.
Is this fine now?
Yeah.
Yes, we're fine.
Oh, thank you. All right. So yeah, leveraging entrepreneurship support organizations in bridging town and GAM. I like this. I'll open with this, these remarks from Daniel Gilman, which is, he was the first president of Johns Hopkins University. And this was the concern he had about American universities. And in his words, he says he hopes that American universities would one day make for less misery among the poor, less ignorance in the schools, less bigotry in the temple, less suffering in the hospital, less fraud in business, and less folly in politics. So this was him, concerned about a mismatch, which we've all, made reference to respect to the African polity. Going further, I have a background in industrial physics, so I really love Albert Einstein, and this is one of the quotes as a claim to him, that the significant problems we face, cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. So as a matter of fact, if we would like to solve a problem, we need to be able to elevate our thinking and to solve those problems. And so I'm talking about how to solve the present day predicament with respect to our tertiary institutions, and that's GAN. And I just want to make a general definition of what GAN represents. GAN is an old ideology that represents graduates, represents the elites from the universities, tertiary institutions, and town refers to the community where they dwell within, the local community, the villages, the towns, the cities, and that's what town represents. And between the 1940s and late 1980s, one of the things that was used to describe universities was the ivory tower as a word. Ivory tower implies that universities became gated. They were so far apart from the world that they were not making more impact. So they became the ivory tower, and there was so much mismatch So you have the gowns who were the elites, just like Mr. Kamara was identifying engineers from African universities who cannot solve engineering problems. And so there was a mismatch, and that's why I also need to also make, a reference to the ongoing conversation with respect to how universities can support education in Nigeria. I've been invested in this for many years. In 2013, I gave a speech at the Commonwealth, at the invitation of the Commonwealth, and it was about how our universities in Africa can begin to adopt entrepreneurial education in all the curriculums. That means regardless of what you study, whether biochemistry, whether physics, whether accounting, entrepreneurship should be infused to help people not look for jobs when they're out of the university, but be able to kickstart, processes and systems that also helps them create jobs. I went further. I mean, the convention also went further. In 2015, I was in the US, actually at Columbia University, and it was the same thing. I was speaking then. I titled my discussion there, Trickling Youth Unemployment in Nigeria by Leveraging on Entrepreneurial Education. So this has been an ongoing conversation, that I've had with different stakeholders. But good news is that we've had advancement, with respect to education. One of the things that was a drawback that I noticed was, even though we're just talking about entrepreneurial education, most universities now have adopted that, but there is still a mismatch in the sense that while we've adopted entrepreneurship education, we've not been able to leverage on the critical needs that our polity needs with respect to Africa. It will surprise you that some graduates are probably still studying nuclear physics in countries like Nigeria, space physics, and you wonder, when are we going to space? And is that really our problem right now? And so the idea is to be able to, leverage on what the present day need is. And we cannot talk about TVET as at today in Africa and not talk about digital evolution, which, Nufik has mentioned about with respect to their projects, with private sector and also in Rwanda. Now, this is just an involvement on investors in Nigeria, across Africa. Few investors have evolved based on the conversations with leveraging on, entrepreneurship and also digital innovation. The C4D Lab is, doing so well in Nairobi, University of Nairobi in Kenya. The Better Center in South Africa and Cape Town doing so well. iLab in Africa also at Kenya's Strathmore University. Ibron Startups also a hub for graduate students from Covenant University in Nigeria. So we've seen advancements that universities are not trying to just shy away from what's going on. Universities are trying to do their bit. But with all of this involvement, there's still a loophole. And I need to make reference to successful models, universities who have leveraged on digital innovation and entrepreneurship to be able to foster job creation. Imperial College has a program called Winnovate, exclusively for women entrepreneurs. You go to London, there is a group of few universities, about 6 of them, coming together under the MedTech Super Connector, and they've been able to leverage on their prowess to be able to help young graduates in the field of medical technology to get training, to get mentorship, to get access to industry partners. There's also an incubator in Paris by the HEC University called Incubator HEC, and it's located actually in Station F. Station F is the biggest incubator for young entrepreneurs in the world. It sits on a space of about 34,000 square meters, and you have over 1,000 entrepreneurs from across the world, across continents, Africa, Latin America, all there trying to develop. What is common to all of these successful models, these universities, is that they've not just allowed themselves to just create programs. They've been able to create successful programs by partnering with entrepreneurship support organizations, which is still quite missing in Africa. And going further, and this is my own view, I think there's a background noise from somewhere. If Dr. Bila can help me check, I think one of the speakers has a background. I'll appreciate that. If you can please mute your mic. I'm hearing a feedback, sorry. Thank you. So respect universities. One of the things I think we should begin to talk about is how universities can channel their focus. As universities, the major strength universities have is the strength when it comes to research. I mean, universities are not built in themselves. They don't have the framework really as business development agencies. And so it's important that, and that's not a bad thing. We are not in a world where we're promoting, isolation. It's about synergy. Look at what you're good at and leverage on your weakness to find other people's strength and work with them. Universities should concentrate on their strength. If they do that, they increase the chances of having successful startups, just like we've seen in the successful models. Most importantly, they should maintain the bedrock of innovation through quality research that they have. And if we channel all of this focus that investors have, one of the things that would happen on the right side of the screen is that it makes prototyping of valuable products easy, because they can concentrate on that. And so when it comes to prototyping, I mean, they have the market already. They have, we can test products. Universities in themselves are able to gather a wide range of multi-stakeholder, from private sector to government sector to the community where they dwell in. And so market viability, even with the students, you can test products, and that's what they have. They also have the brand to be able to leverage on other people's, strengths, just like the private sector, to attract investments. But one thing they should do is allow ESOs to do their job. And what are ESOs? ESOs are entrepreneurship support organizations, just like this implies. And these are groups that have been created to train and sometimes also fund entrepreneurs. That's what they do. As a matter of fact, as of 2018, you see from the slides there that there has been over 440 support structures in Africa, over 440. And that's about 40% increase from 2016. So when it comes to ESOs, they've been increasing, especially in West Africa, where you even have the most emerging economies, actually the ones even giving birth to more support structures. And that's quite important, because the bane of the discussion today is how to get universities to synergize with this set of people. What are the types of ESOs that we have? We have hubs, we have incubators. Incubators are the ones who target, fresh ideas. They look for young graduates who have ideas to share, and they help them nurture. From the word incubate, they incubate. Accelerators look for the ones who have some level of traction, and they support them. We have ones with co-working spaces that offer shared space for collaboration. We have the ones called Fab Lab. This one's helps with respect to frugal innovation, which obviously Dana was mentioning also, and they help with manufacturing. We have venture capitalists, angel investors. All of these make a whole sort of ecosystem called the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And ESOs power all of this. What do? ESOs, they train, they advise young people, they network them to mentors. And mentors, they necessarily, I mean, I finished from the 4 walls of university too. Sometimes I feel like my mentors in university were also limited. All they could offer was research skill. When it comes to business development, they could not, because you can't even give what you don't have. They were limited. And so when it comes to ESOs, these ones would be able to connect mentors who have the prowess to be able to help young entrepreneurs or help our students to be able to leapfrog their ideas into the market. They have the facility, they have access to funding, they could also help with infrastructural support, and most importantly, they help with business development. And according to the World Economic Forum and ANDE, which is Aspen Network and Development Entrepreneurs, they gave the 8 pillars for an entrepreneurial ecosystem: markets, human capital, funding, support system, infrastructure, culture, government policy, education. All of these layers of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, the ESOs function quite very well in all of this. Not schools. Schools might be able to help with funding, but they can't help with markets. Sometimes school could help with education, but they don't even have the culture, because it's not in their framework to be able to develop job creators, as it were, because they are very theoretical, like we know. And so here is what the proposal is on how to advance the discussion. Now, if it's about sustainability, universities and tertiary institutions must begin to follow a level of partnership with ESOs in this framework, engage with them for understanding. The way ESOs think and the way tertiary institutions think are quite different. And so when you even communicate research and you communicate findings, tertiary institutions in their makeup are very bureaucratic and they're very theoretical. When they engage for understanding, there's a level of communication that both partners can understand and can help them advance the quest for raising more employable graduates. The second part is support for faster traction. Universities have traction in the sense that they have the market, they have the pool of audience. Some universities have 10,000 students. Now, with ESO's combined efforts, they can leverage on that pool of markets to be able to test, some products that can enter into the market. So it's all about synergy and partnership. They can also synergize for multiplier effects. If the game and the end result is to reduce unemployment, be able to chunk out employable graduates who have employable skills. As a matter of fact, I saw on Twitter, a few weeks ago that the CEO of Jumia in Africa acclaimed publicly on a live conversation that the reason why we don't employ African graduates is because they lack digital skills. I mean, with all they've made so much in Africa, I felt so bad that a top CEO would be saying that, but it just means there's work to be done. There's a gap. ESOs are doing a lot, now chunking out data analysts, training people to leverage on digital technology, but they can't do that in isolation. They need to be able to work with universities. And the other part is there has to be a strategic framework to achieve the vision. Most universities probably best level of engagement is that we have researchers who have been able to publish on journals. I mean, they have visions to be able to say, we have young scientists whose award are probably on a shelf. Those are the things that make universities happy, but not for ESOs. ESOs are so business-oriented. For them, failure is when you chunk out 10 startups and none of them succeed. They don't create jobs in the markets. They're not sustainable after the first year of funding or the second year of funding. So the vision for ESOs are different. It's about job creation. It's about sustainability for entrepreneurs. If universities will combine their strength with ESOs, they can both have a strategy framework. I have 2 more slides and I round up for discussions. Now I checked this. It's not so clear, but I'll just read it out. This is called from PitchBook, an online platform that did a survey with respect to looking at the universities in the US and comparing what they've done from 2006 to 2020. That's a space of about 14 years. Now look at the first on the group on the chart, Stanford University. In this number of years, this period, they've been able to create over 1,400 CEOs, successful startups, and they've been able to raise minimum $47 billion. The next is University of California, MIT the third. MIT has raised about $4 billion. And if you go down to the last or the 10th of the list, which is University of Illinois with 621 founders, and they've been able to raise $16.4 billion. A common denominator to all of these guys, universities, that they are not isolated workers. This crop of stakeholders or gowns, the universities, the gowns, they've been able to identify ESOs to work with that has helped them build this traction. And it's about learning from the best. It's not about copying and pasting, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Tertiary institutions just need to be able to leverage their strengths, search for ESOs that have the prowess and the methodology to be helping them to translate their graduates into employable graduates or even job creators. I will end on a closing note with this. Despite the pandemic, just to let you know that things have been happening even in Africa, which is, I want to end on a very good note with a good news, as Dr. Biola asked me to. Within even COVID-19 period, about 128 African startups have raised at least $1 million of funding, even within over 128. Now, this already equates to 26% over what was raised last year, despite the pandemic. But bear in mind, all of these guys are not coming from universities, not from computer science graduates or engineering graduates. Most of them are, accidental entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that were supported by ESOs. Now, the question is, where are the guys who are studying business development in the universities? Where are they? There's a mismatch. The ESOs are doing a lot, but we can do much more in the African context if the universities would be able to leverage on ESOs. This picture is from CCUP and Bosun Tijani. I know it's just a descriptive thing. I decide to, interpret this in my own understanding. It's probably telling Mark Zuckerberg, look out there, check out Africa. And if you can see Africa, there is a mismatch between universities and between the ESOs. Now, the town and the gown are not working together. And the reason why we are alive and doing well is because we've come to be that bridge. And that's one ESO saying that. I mean, he didn't say that, but that's the interpretation. And Zuckerberg is you can see he's quite interested in what he has to say. ESOs need to, work with tertiary institutions. they need to bridge the gap. And I think once we get that ideology set, let's universities focus on what they are gifted at. Don't let them get distracted and let them just leverage on what already exists. And I think we can change the tide and the story. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for this very inspiring talk. And I see a note from Diana in the chat, which says that we are optimistic and things are happening in Africa. And this is what you seem to be making clear to all of us. But what does come through, and this is the question to you, is that a lot of this mismatch, this town and gown seems to be initiatives here and there. It is not structural.
Yeah.
And if this, if that, if universities would do this, if that. So the question is this something that should be left to individual initiatives, or is this something that should be mandated somehow, maybe in accreditations, in evaluations of universities? I'd like your thoughts on that. That's the first question. Another question is, how do we leverage, this is from Abidemi Olatunbosun. He says, how can the African diaspora community be leveraged towards building entrepreneurial capacities? And I think underlying this is, it all seems a bit hit and miss. What are your thoughts here? It's good that things are happening. It's good to be optimistic, but so please, your thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Biola, for that. Yeah, so on the first question, what's the place, how do we more like create a structured environment? I think there are things that just the government can do. And we can't shelve from having the right policies. When it comes to the world where people are doing great stuff from the European context, where there's this sort of coherency in the partnerships, is because there's a policy backup. So you answered the question rightly also. You mentioned how we can adopt this in policy and evaluate tertiary institutions even based on partnerships. Rather than, sometimes we get to accredit universities on different, which is fine, we can keep that. But now we should have new conversations from policymakers on how many ESOs have you partnered with and how many of the startups in this partnership or graduates have been able to create jobs and are standing even after they got the first funding. So the investors are not now thinking about how to award certificates because there's so much on you to say, if they're coming from computer science, are they developing apps that are solving traffic problems in Lagos? Are they developing apps that are solving problems in Ghana in the agricultural space? Are they solving problems in Gambia? It's not enough to just come out and say, I'm a Java programmer. If the Java cannot solve and help us live a basic life and decent life in our polity, with respect to Accra, Kinshasa, or whatever, that graduate is of no use, which is the mismatch. Don't separate. So we need to begin to make demands on universities more and begin to say, no, it's not about, we graded first-class students, about 30 in industrial physics. I did industrial physics as my bachelor's, and I developed a locally made wind turbine. I went to the markets in Lagos called Oshodi, and I bought local things, and I created a wind turbine, but that research project is on a shelf somewhere. So we need to begin to, and then respect to diaspora. How can the diaspora be involved? I think the diaspora has something called diaspora capital. 3 things for diaspora capital. They have people. People means the human resource, and this comes also with knowledge. The diaspora prize themselves that they've been exposed to better ways of doing things. They have international exposure. They have high-level thinking. We can leverage on the people to be able to solve that. And the other part is obviously capital, beyond remittances. Oh, Nigeria, Ghana is remitting, which is going to consumables. I mean, we begin to have to think about diaspora capital in the sense that let Africans and diaspora begin to fund projects in Africa, which is something what we are doing at our own level with Friends of Nigeria, so that they have a bias. Diasporans might not want to go back home, but you can't take the origin. And it's also a way to change the brain drained conversation. There's a brain drain, but with diaspora, you can change that conversation and have brain gain. So while there's migration, diaspora is the good part of migration, because with diaspora, you can offer a platform where they can begin to support ventures with their funds and with their skills, even while not based in Africa.
So thank you very much. I think this is good food for thought. We have to have policies that encourage brain gain. That's a nice one. And indeed, this is a policy, government policy level issue, government level policy discussion. And Armand says that actually there are some good examples in Kenya and Rwanda where accreditation of TVET curricula demands this sort of evidence-based partnering as part of the accreditation process. And I think this is certainly something that we should pursue further as we continue to talk about TVET education and training to bridge the 21st century skills gap so that we can actually have a market-driven curricula that makes sense for our local economies and communities. And on that note, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Abiodun Odunuga. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Lots of food for thought. And this is our bridge to our next talk. Also, again, somebody who cuts across different jurisdictions, so to speak. And this is Mr. Rotimi Olawale, the founder and chief executive of JR Farms LLC. And Mr. Olawale has a mission to transform agriculture in Africa by undertaking opportunities for growth and business that will engender sustainable food production and increased incomes for farmers in Africa. I will leave the rest of the introduction to him. Mr. Olawale, Rotimi Olawale, I hope you are there.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, excellent. So please, the floor is yours. You're very welcome to share with us your contribution for this afternoon's discussion.
Okay, good afternoon, Dr. Abiola and everyone on this workshop. Appreciate the contributions of the speakers who have spoken earlier. Yeah, I think very interesting conversation so far. Yes, Olawale Rotimi, I'm the founder of JR Farms. JR Farms is an agribusiness company. Basically, we run on 5 goals to ensure food security on the continent, to end hunger, to create jobs, decent jobs for youth and women, to add value to African agro-commodities, and to raise the next generation of agrarian leaders in Africa. Currently, we work in 3 countries on the continent, Nigeria, Rwanda, and Zambia. In Nigeria, we have majorly activities in cassava value chain. And then we also have coffee stations in Lagos and Abuja. And in Rwanda, basically, we work with, we have a partnership with the government where we work with over 4,000 coffee farmers. And we roast and package coffee and export from Rwanda to various countries, including Nigeria and yeah, the UK and other countries which we have exported to. And then in Zambia, currently we're working on, we're building a factory in Zambia, looking at livestock feed in Zambia, bringing innovation on board through the cassava value chain as a major input to livestock feed production in order to reduce the reliance on maize, which is becoming very scarce in Zambia. Yeah, so and also we also have operations in the Netherlands, where we basically look at how we can harness investment from Africans in Netherlands and Europe generally into the agri sector in Africa. Yeah, so that's just like an overview. We work with a lot of organizations, yeah, within and outside the continent. We work with some UN agencies, including the ILO and FAO. We work with a lot of governments at national and state level in various countries in Africa. Yeah, so I would just briefly, of course, talk about the current status of agribusiness in Africa. So yeah, of course, we all know that 2/3 of the world's arable land is in Africa, and Africa is inherently positioned to be successful in agriculture. And also, if we look at most of the agro commodities globally, a lot of them are produced in Africa. For example, Africa is the largest producer of cocoa. Africa is the largest producer of cassava also, and other crops also produced in Africa. I would often say that almost all things grow on the African soil. Yeah, so of course in the 60s, we we had agriculture really boom in Africa. Using Nigeria as a model anyway, agriculture really boomed. There were a lot of agricultural exports. There were a lot of foreign earnings from agriculture. But of course, in the recent times, in the early millennium, and also in the 90s, when there was a oil boom and then technology came in place, a lot of young people are less interested in agriculture, and then more focused about technology, about other things. Yeah, but the story is changing really, as more and more young people are getting interested in agriculture in Africa. But unfortunately, of course, there are no really formal institutional learning process for young entrepreneurs who are interested in getting involved in agriculture to learn. And the knowledge gap is really playing, affecting the growth of the agricultural industry in Africa. Yeah, for us to raise the next generation of agrarian leaders, for us to bring in young people into agriculture is a necessity, because when you look at the average age of an African farmer, it's between 55 and 60 years. So the question is, in the next 2 decades, where will this 60-year-old farmer be? Will he be able to get involved in agriculture? Will he have the energy to get involved in agribusiness? So for Africa to raise the next generation of agrarian leaders, it's a necessity, it's a mandate. So as a business, we are doing a lot with a lot of government and development organizations to ensure that a lot of young people get adequate knowledge. We started a knowledge mentorship support as a company. We have mentored a lot of young agripreneurs across the continent, giving them knowledge, insights on how they can successfully get into agribusiness and add value. More also to also support this. Recently, we launched a Green Agribusiness Fund in partnership with United Nations Food Organization, Food Agriculture Organization, FAO. And this program is holistic in the sense that it doesn't only offer funding. We are not only offering funding for agribusiness startups in Africa, but we're also giving other support such as training, such as capacity building, such as exposure, taking them to conferences, taking them to fairs, giving them financial mentorship, preparing them for more funding, so that they have holistic support that will make them succeed. Because one of the things we have seen also is that aside the fact that there are no institutions that actually train young people to get involved in to be successful in agribusiness, most of the funding initiatives for young people who are in agribusiness in Africa are just funding instruments that do not give support in the area of capacity building. And you agree with me that businesses don't only succeed because they have money, but because they also possess other managerial skills to succeed. Yeah. So that's like an overview of our intervention so far. Of course, there are a lot of foreign interventions on the continent in relation to agric. A lot from government of nations like Netherlands. Some of them, like the Dutch embassy, we have a good relationship with them in Nigeria, and then we're privileged to work at some point with a couple of projects with them until even sometimes last year. And also universities like Wageningen in the Netherlands are doing a couple of projects around Africa. In Nigeria, in East Africa, and also West Africa in the cocoa value chain and coffee value chain, other value chain. Yeah. So evidently, Africa is can be self-sustaining when it comes to food production. But of course, there's a need for a lot of trainings for young people because in as much as some young people now are getting involved in agriculture, there's also the knowledge gap, like I've mentioned. We also have that challenge at the initial stage of our journey as in the agri sector. There's a knowledge gap. So there's a need for a huge investment in trainings. For example, now we realize when we launched the Green Agribusiness Fund in July, and then we received over 7,000 interest from applicants in Rwanda and Nigeria. But sadly, one of the challenges we realize is that these businesses, about 90% of them are not formalized businesses. So most of these young people do not have the right knowledge to formalize their business. They don't have the right knowledge to even go about the business. So for Africa to be self-sustaining, we have the potential to be self-sustaining in agribusiness, in the food system, in food production. But of course, the young people need the right knowledge. They need the right information. They need the right trainings to be successful in agribusiness. Well, some of the threats I see to agribusiness education here is number one. I think it's a more of a mindset, because currently the approach to agribusiness on the continent is more of an intervention sector. It's not taken as a business. The government sees it as more of an intervention sector. And then also infrastructural challenges are there, because in most of the rural areas where you have a lot of agricultural activities, where you have the farms located, most of them do not have good access to infrastructure like roads, like electricity, like good water systems. So young people are not encouraged to get involved in agriculture. Yeah, also, I think one of the key things is also poor, inadequate access to technology. Yeah, because, excuse me, young people want to do agriculture differently. Yeah, but the right technologies are not adequately available. And then some of them that are available are also very expensive, you see. So this is also one of the threats I see that's hindering access to agribusiness education on the continent. Yeah, the opportunities are numerous because in the sector there's a lot of room for innovation. For example, innovations that can link markets to farms to markets. I think that's one major innovation. We're talking to a university in the Switzerland, ongoing since last month, developing an innovation in this line, because it's a major problem across the continent. Linking the farms to markets, it's a major problem, and then there's no holistic solution that actually solves. There's no holistic innovation that actually solves this. So that's like a major opportunity I see. Yeah. Also, another opportunity. Also, of course, we have a lot of what's it called? A lot of institutions here that can be like a collaboration center. You know, already the youths are in school. Yeah, for example, in the universities. In polytechnics, which is equivalent to TVT in Europe. Yeah, the polytechnics are there, but there could be some form of integration between, or partnership between, training institute and also innovators who can train in agribusiness education. Yeah, there are a couple of institutions like that in Nigeria who are doing this. For example, the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, IITA, they're collaborating with various institutions, learning institutions, to offer agribusiness trainings to young people. I know currently they have another innovation with MasterCard Foundation to train about 40,000 Nigerian youth. Yeah, so I know the African Development Bank also is doing something related to that through Enable Youth, offering agribusiness training to various individuals. So these are a couple of opportunities, and of course threats to agribusiness education, across the continent. Yeah, so I'll keep it short that way, and then open the floor for possible questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rotimi Olawale. Very practical case study. You have highlighted very vividly the knowledge gap, and I think a very serious one. If we can't feed ourselves, what are we talking about? So I think this is a really fundamental issue. The question is, and I think you also touch on a very good point, which is the lack of infrastructure to facilitate engagement at all, even where you want to bring this entrepreneurial ecosystem together. So I see there are a couple of comments in the chat, and I'm just going to give Tom, maybe you want to, because he has an interesting idea of of using some kind of cross-pollination. And so maybe he wants to say something about that. Ton, do you want to contribute to this discussion?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, what I see already for many years is that in Africa, one of the fastest growth sectors are in the religious sphere and in the entertainment sphere. And a lot of the discussions that you bring to the fore this afternoon seems to be related to the make industry, to agriculture, etc. Now, my question is, what type of cross-pollination is happening to and fro between these more service-oriented sectors and the make industry?
Sorry, we can't hear you. You're muted, Mr. Olawale Rotimi.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I didn't know the question was for me. Can Ton repeat the question, please?
Yes. It's about cross-pollination between the service sectors, like the religious companies or religious ventures on the one hand, and the entertainment industry on the other side, and what's happening there in terms of innovations. Can they be transferred to, say, learning experiences in the make industry and the other way around?
Yeah, so it's difficult for me to answer this because I'm not in those industries. It's quite difficult for me to answer. For me, I'm more focused in the agri industry, and that's where my specialization is. So, yeah, I may not be able to answer that.
Well, I think if I may jump in, I think it is in Dutch they have a saying that you should roll with the oars that you have. Huh? And we do see a lot of activity in the religious Nollywood sphere where there is so much use of 21st century technologies. So that maybe where there's a vacuum, we should first start with structures that are emerging and how those can be leveraged. Maybe that is, I think maybe that was where Tom was kind of going. And I know that churches build schools, they build universities. Why can't they train farmers? Is this, this is just, okay. I think it is a thought along those.
Yeah, if he's talking around along that line, yeah, I know that a lot of religious organizations have different training activities across the country. Yeah, some of them, of course, even have farms. For example, now I know of the Living Faith Church. They have a university that is an agrarian university called Landmark University. As a company, we have a very strong relationship with that university. And then as a matter of interest, we also employ graduates from that university to work in our company because we find them reliable and good in agribusiness. So it's an agrarian university seated on over 1,000 hectares of land with a high level technology in poultry, in animal livestock feed production and crop production and food processing. And then they have a commercial farm and they have a research farm. So the students are exposed to both the commercial farm and the research farm. So they go on the research and then they go on the commercial farm to practicalize. So this is like a church innovation owned by a church. And then you have also Covenant University Farms, for example, is also owned by a church. So there are a couple of churches I know in Nigeria that have training activities around agribusiness and also other innovations like IT. For example, I'm also aware because we have some level of relationship with Covenant University alumni. Sometimes I know they launch this challenge. It's a Christian school. They launched this challenge, more like a funding scheme to invest in entrepreneurs from the alumni network. So there are a couple of innovations from churches, religious organizations in Nigeria to train young people. I myself have been part of trainings in North Central organized by churches where I'm one of the facilitators to train young people about agribusiness. And also in such trainings, they invite people also from other fields, maybe some from IT,
and then some from other trades to come and train young people. So yeah, I know the church is investing a lot in that, and also recently with the development with COVID, which is also affecting a lot of people are losing their jobs. I know that I've read a lot of churches coming up with training schemes for 2021, and some of them not just training schemes, they will train and also give funding for you to start up the business. So if it's that in that line, I think some of them are doing extremely well, coming up with training instruments for young people in IT, in agribusiness. Agribusiness is now quite important, not only in Nigeria, but also in other parts of Africa. Not because of the dwindling oil revenue alone, but also because the country sees it as the only way, and the continent sees it as the only way to create a lot of jobs for the young people. As you know, that agribusiness has a very long value chain, and at every point you can always employ people at every point. So the continent sees it as a major way. And as a business, we have seen that, because every country we go to work in Africa, the government always have a roadmap, a plan to revolutionize the economy through agribusiness. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question a little bit.
I'm going to have to jump in here because we have to move to our last panel, but I think thank you very much for this very interesting exchange. It does seem clear that there's a variety of stakeholders, and we in these discussions, we have to leverage every opportunity and every avenue of bridging this knowledge gap that you have so well described. Thank you so much. And now we move to our last presentation for this evening. And this is Mr. Jonas Aryee from the University of Ghana. And we're really looking forward to this more educational, education perspective. We've heard a lot about knowledge gaps, about market-driven curricula, about evidence-based curricula. So it's been very nice to hear your presentation and your take, along with Mr. George van Dijk and I believe Torben. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Mr. Jonas, Dr. Jonas Aryee, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Like you said, I think we are the outliers here. And so I'll probably try to toe the line of all the rest. So like you said, I'm here with a couple of my colleagues, no, all of my colleagues. So myself, Jonas Aryee, and then I have George van Dijk, who is right here with me. And we have in Denmark, Tobin Andersen from the Aarhus University, and Annette Hansen, also from the Aarhus University. She's a team leader on a project that we are undertaking in the port of Tema in Accra, in Ghana, sorry. And as part of this project, the project is called PEP, Port Efficiency and Public Partnership. And as part of it, we have a thematic area considering human capacity building. And that theme has taken us to the Regional Maritime University, where myself and George van Dijk work. And we've sat through a lot of the lectures, also visited some of the institutions that train human capacity for the maritime industry, like SILT and GIF, Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders. But our presentation today is basically on RMU, and we're taking a couple of case studies that's hopefully can contribute to the discussions on vocational and academic training. And we found a good fit for this conference because the maritime industry or training seafarers has always had this issue of vocational and academic training. And in the sphere of maritime lecturers, it's also a hot debate concerning this as well. Historically, many maritime institutions have been vocational institutions. I mean, training somebody to work in a ship has always been an apprenticeship exercise. So at the onset, people always have to go on board to learn from somebody else, and then they grow into officers. And so that has been the trend. But recently we've seen the trend where this vocational education has been mixed up with academic education. So if we look at RMU itself, RMU started as a nautical college, training seafarers for Ghana's national shipping line called the Black Star Line. At that period, we also had other West African countries having their own shipping lines, like Nigeria Shipping Line, Cameroon Shipping Line, Ivory Coast, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, all of these shipping lines have collapsed now. And so we're trying to use the lessons from that period until now to explain how industry and school partnerships either succeed or not from recent examples in RMU. So that would be our objective for today. So back to RMU. RMU has evolved from a nautical college, like I said before, just training seafarers for Ghana's national shipping line. So at that time, employment was actually guaranteed. So right from your training in RMU, you go on to the ships that belong to the states, and then you were employed. And these were purely vocational training for 2 years for the nautical science, and then 3 years for the marine engineers. So marine engineers basically are mechanics on the ships, and then the nautical science students are those who would rise up to the rank, which people normally know as captains, and so on and so forth. So it was purely vocational until 2003, when the academy then, so it's evolved from a nautical college. In 1983, UNDP and some of the other partners in the maritime education and training sector realized that educating people for sea was expensive. Around the time, most of the national lines were also collapsing, and support from government was dwindling. And so they had to find a way of training people also. And so they brought all these countries together. So at RMU, it is run by 5 Anglophone countries, including Ghana. So we have Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Gambia, and then Cameroon. So these are the 5 countries that are part of the regional maritime university. So you can see from the name, the regionalization of the academy. And then we have a French version that is also patronized by the Francophone countries in Abidjan. But not to waste much time, my focus for this very slide is on the transition from the diploma awarding institution to a degree programs for the marine engineering and nautical science. So once in 2003, we decided to be a university, the programs were upgraded to degree programs. And there's a marked difference between what we used to do and what we do now. And we have evidence of the results that we can show to you later. So in the diploma programs, it was partly in the classroom also, but mostly hands-on in the workshops. And I remember myself when I entered the university as a student in 2003, we still had some of the diploma students in there. And in their program, in a semester, one of the semesters, they never entered the classroom. They were assigned to various institutions or companies within the Tema area in Ghana. So they would spend 2 weeks, say, in Tema Shipyard. They would spend 2 weeks at the port in Tema. They'll spend the next week, 2 weeks in, say, Tema Steelworks. The next 2 weeks in State Transport Company, and so on and so forth. And even for those of us who were students, we could see that these people who were our seniors then had very hands-on approach to everything. If you needed something to be fixed on campus, you didn't need to call anybody from outside campus. These students could fix it for you. So they were really good with their hands. Fast forward 2003, we started a degree program. The first batch of the degree program graduated in 2007 after 4 years. And until now, we've been running that. We see a marked difference between those students we met and my colleagues who were trained in the degree program and after. When the degree program came into being, for starters, we were very few, just like the diploma students. I remember my batch were just 30 people. The diploma classes had about 20 people also, 20 to 25 people, not too many, because at that time, entry requirements were quite vigorous. But once you transition to degree, the numbers increased. Now we talk about hundreds of people in the classroom now. And that means less time in the workshops, more time in the classrooms, less lab work because the labs, the infrastructure hasn't changed much. Less time in the labs and then more time in the classroom. So that practical aspect and the relationship we had with industry, all those 2 weeks of rotating in these other companies all stopped. And now we have a group of students who are much more theoretically imbued than the practice. And so they are not very confident. In another study that I'm doing, some of my colleagues, we interviewed some of them about knowledge transfer and so on and so forth. And what we realized is that when they go onto the ships after 4 years of training, they meet other students or other people from other countries and from other institutions like the Philippines and so on. And the response we're getting is that they feel inadequate. The guys from the Philippines and these other countries, and then in any way, Philippines is the highest, what do you call it? They produce the most seafarers in the world, the ratings. But these guys are hands-on people because they also do a lot of diploma programs and it's very hands-on. And they expect that those who have done a degree program would know more. And so the expectation is quite high for these degree students, but they don't meet the expectation. And for the student themselves, they confess that they feel inadequate once they get on board these ships. Following the large numbers that we now admit, there's less time for practical training, but that is not only the problem. Maritime education requires a lot of upgrading in terms of knowledge and hands-on practical work. In most universities that are well endowed in developed countries, whilst you are a student, you would go on board a ship probably for a semester or a year whilst you are in school to do what we call cadetship. And cadetship, I can interpret as an apprenticeship period here. But because we do not have a training ship, what happens is that the student must finish the 4-year program before he has his first taste of a ship or working on a ship. In recent regulations by the International Maritime Organizations, you could replace that period with some simulator training. And so you need to acquire a simulator in order to have at least some semblance of real life experience on a ship. And these simulators, they don't come cheap. They're very expensive. And whilst regulations continue to change around the world, you need to update these simulators as well and get state-of-the-art equipment, which is a problem for most maritime institutions. So this is where we find ourselves. The state shipping lines are gone, so jobs are really not secured as well. So having to go through an expensive education and then coming out without certainty of a job is also quite difficult. So we see the numbers increasing, yes, but usually people would have to work ashore or stay at home for a long time before they can have an opportunity to go to sea. And that is where some of these partnerships have come to help in solving that problem. And we will talk about it later. So to recap the problems, there's rapid change in technology in the maritime sector. And so there's a need for constant knowledge and technology and equipment upgrade. There's resource constraints in acquiring the training ship. There's the cost of the simulator, the maintenance, and then the frequent updates that we have to do. Cadetship placement on board the ships are difficult and competitive because there's so many maritime schools around the world also looking for these opportunities for their students. And so without a partnership with industry, that's a very difficult thing to achieve. In-house on campus, there's an aging staff who were former seafarers who have the experience. But what is happening is that it's been a long time since they left the ship. And so current developments on board are not known to them, or even if it's known to them, they haven't had a practical experience of that. And so that is causing some kind of problem, especially where these seafarers come back from sea. And I need to explain something here. The seafaring profession is a very long journey. So after these 4 years of training, what happens is that once you go on board a ship for the first time, you're a cadet, you're an apprentice. You do that for 18 months. You come back to school again to do what we call a class 3. That qualifies you to be an officer now. And then you can go back on board. If you want to be a class 3 officer for the rest of your life, you can stay there. But if you want to move to a class 2 and to a captain or a chief engineer, you have to keep coming back to school. So what happens is that if a staff has obsolete knowledge, that when you have to teach somebody who has been on board recently, he's going to be the one teaching you what's due on board the ship. So it's a very difficult situation for some of these aging staff. We have tried to solve that problem by training young staff. We tried a program where some of the staff would join the ship, and then they come back to teach, and then they continue their training, and sometimes they go on board the ship and so on and so. But what we realize is some of them are not interested in going to sea. So after their first trip, they stop. And so we are not getting that experienced staff that we need to be able to engage those who are at sea and continue to come back to the institution for upgrading courses. To support some of the things I've already said, I would like to use some of the controversies surrounding the evolution of the polytechnics in Ghana into technical universities. So those of you who are familiar with Ghana would know that the last government tried to convert some of the polytechnics who were really into HND, higher national diploma training, into universities, and they had to meet a certain criteria. And a paper from Kielsen in 2016 confirmed that the diploma programs were not attracting as many people as the degree programs also. So, and I believe that's an attitudinal issue. People like the degree more than the diploma. And to confirm that also in RMU, we had this program called the top-up programs for those who had a diploma. And we realized there are a lot of people coming from industry with the higher national diplomas from all these technical polytechnics, seeking to upgrade, because what they say is that they do all the hard job in their companies, but those who have the degree take the biggest salaries and they are their bosses. Yet they can feel within themselves that they know better than these guys with the degree programs, because they have the diploma guys have hands-on technical expertise. So that's what's happening. Everybody is going for the degrees. So the numbers are increasing. But the risk is that we don't know whether the new technical universities will still focus on the workshop training and the hands-on training once their numbers continue to increase like this, and if they will not try to compete with the traditional universities. Another issue, the attitudinal change that I kind of want to point out is one from Frimpong in 2018, also talking about even the record keeping in the Polytechnic changing because they had to change status from a Polytechnic to a university status. So the attitude is not just with the public, but it's also even within the institutions. The fact that they're running a diploma, they do things different from what they are doing as a degree awarding institution. Sorry. The discussions around TVET training has been active recently, and some of the literature we came across, looking at South Africa, the problems, a lot of these actually highlight problems and a few give solutions. And I like to go through these few. So Aryee in 2012 was looking at South Africa. And I think some of the problems he identified was the fact that there's inadequate social security, and there's high level of job insecurity and high levels of inequality. Many times when we talk about TVET and training people for, we look at people who are unemployed, but there are also so many people who are actually gainfully employed, but have skills that they can actually put into making product and so on and so forth. But they do not have the time and the leverage to be able to do that. How do you leave your job, your 5 to 8 job, and pursue an interest which you know that you can actually make something out of? How do your employers perceive that? I think recently I saw a news article about Sweden also, where people were given the opportunity to take some time off job and try to pursue their own interests. And if it doesn't work, they can come back to the job. But if you're having insecurities like this, and there's no social safety net for you, it's hard to venture into those areas. Amedume et al. Also mentioned so many problems, which I know a lot of us are familiar with. So the lack of facilities to train the students, the lack of technical training for even the facilitators or the teachers, the limited number of training institutions, and so on and so forth. All of these are what we see also in RMU. So finance is a typical issue. And I think for Amponsa and Onoha, they have the same issue as well, finance. A lot of the private universities that are coming are into business programs, because to set up technical education, you need equipment, you need labs, and so on and so forth. And these are expensive. A few institutions have been able to do that, but they've been able to do so also because of industry school collaborations. So in Ghana, Ashasi University is one of the light bearers, and recently they introduced an engineering program, and I know MasterCard has put a lot of money into all of this. So that has been the only way that is making them survive in this engineering program. But if you don't have these kinds of partnerships, then it's very difficult to run these programs. Ousu talks about expanding the target group for, I think he talked about a lot more about entrepreneurship. We teach entrepreneurship in the schools, but there are a lot of people who are actually in the business already that need this kind of training. And so they also need to be reached as well. Now, we want to concentrate much more on the partnerships, and that's why we choose this theoretical approach of resource dependency theory. RMU itself has high connections because it's a regional institution, which means that it's run by these 5 countries. Each of these countries contributes to the running of the school. So the Ministry of Transport in all of these countries supports the school with a yearly contribution. And because it's also the sole regional maritime institution for the Anglophone countries, many companies who want to have partnerships with any training institution would look at RMU first. And so we had so many partnerships or MOUs signed with so many companies, some of which we pursue, others are very, what was the word? Yeah, some fell apart, others are dormant, and so on and so forth. In connection with that, we also look at the industry school partnership framework which really fits into what RMU does. So in this system structure, the macro level, meso level, exo level, and macro level, we have partnerships in all of this. So we have partnerships with the countries because they are members. The Ghana government supports the institution massively because the institution is in Ghana, and by the agreement, they're supposed to provide infrastructure and so on and so forth. Because the countries are represented by the ministries of transport, we also have that level of collaboration with the ministries also, and the ministries are in charge of a lot of the state institutions like the port authorities, the maritime administrations, and so on. So all these institutions also contribute to help the states in sustaining RMU. And then we have the partnerships with shipping lines and so on and so forth, and then other companies that are related to the maritime industry. Where our case studies would center would be on these operational principles and the operationalization of these principles and the outcomes, which we will show in the 2 case studies that would come later. Okay. So I have Dr. Van Dyke here. He has been in charge of a lot of reporting a lot of these projects to the ministry because he's a focal person for the institution at the Ministry of Transport. So I'd like him to take this session and then take us through that. You want to do it from here?
And please take a look at the chat, Mr. Jonas. There are some questions that came in. Maybe you can just look at them in preparation.
Yeah, I've noted them. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonas. So we would look at 2 case studies. The first one being the case study between the Regional Maritime University and the Government of Ghana through the Petroleum Commission of Ghana. So the university was selected as a center for training within the oil and gas center, the oil and gas capacity building project. I think, Jonas, you've taken away the, yes. If I may, I'll just take over, it's fine, thank you. Within the oil and gas capacity building project. So we were one of 5 universities or technical training institutions that were selected. Each institution was given about $3 million funding to procure equipment for the training. So for RMU, we procured hydraulic equipment, a well simulator, crane simulator, and a host of other equipment that could basically be used in training a student in petroleum engineering or subsea engineering or even welding for the oil and gas sector. Unfortunately, the outcomes were not very good. We were noted in a World Bank report to have underutilized our facilities, and that was true. The university didn't focus on the curriculum development for the different programs that could have fed into the oil and gas training. We didn't have any strategies for utilizing the equipment that had been procured. And I must say all these equipment were put in one building called the laboratory complex, which is a 3-story building and full of all these equipment. We didn't look at equipment certification. I think later on we realized that the initial ideas about certification were wrong, and we had to go back to the drawing table and start to put things together. And also trainer programs were more expensive than the university anticipated. And we also had to look at that again and try and get some staff who would take a study leave and then go and get trained to run some of these programs. So the results at the end of 2018, that was the period where the feedback process was done, was very bad. There was no training done, absolutely no training done, after an investment of more than $3 million had been put into the university. So from a theoretical perspective, we realized that in terms of power, power was skewed towards RMU because we had the autonomy to dictate the pace at which we would develop these capacities. We were given the free will to develop our courses, to market our programs, to certify the programs and the facilities. And the Petroleum Commission, which had the mandate to ensure that this was being done after collaborating with the World Bank to get us the funding, they basically sat back and allowed the university to do this. The university was unable to do a lot of these things also because of the lack of resources and on some level also the lack of will to go forward. There was no responsibility assigned to certain departments initially to see to some of these things done. And it was all centralized, and this affected our outcome. The second partnership was or is with a company called Bernhard Schulte Ship Management, BSM. Bernhard Schulte is a German family-owned business. They basically manage and operate vessels all across the world. So in 2017, they set up a local company called Schulte Maritime Services in Ghana, and with their headquarters on our university campus. Now, the RMU signed a deal with Schulte Maritime Services for the following reasons. Obviously, as Jonas has said, we had resource constraints, and ideally have a training vessel, put our cadets on board the vessels and have them trained before they complete their courses, but we were not able to do that because of resource constraints. And our students also were facing difficulty in obtaining seagoing jobs. And so you'd have a student graduate and probably stay at home for another 2 years. By the time they're able to get onto a ship, they've lost a lot of the training that they received, because there's no way that you can keep on, going through drills and so on and so forth. And within the program itself, there was a lack of practical training, obviously not getting onto a ship, but also with simulator training. And I remember in the last 4 years, we've had a lot of difficulties with our simulators, and that is our bridge simulators, which navigators use for training, because equipment would get spoiled, would need maintenance, and then we wouldn't have the requisite knowledge or the people here to be able to maintain the equipment. But after signing this agreement with a BSM, the outcome is that the relationship is very strong. BSM is on campus, full visibility. They are involved in everything that we do with regards to training of students, right from curriculum development to their leadership training, confidence, and general knowledge. And because there's a physical presence on campus, it's difficult to ignore them as a partner to the university. So there's a clear win-win situation for both organizations. Up until now, we have over 400 RMU graduates on their vessels. And this is quite remarkable for a little country like Ghana. But just as illustrated by Flynn, the degree of power still favors Bernard Schulte, because they have the advantage of having the best recruits that they have trained get onto their vessels at the time that they want. They do the first selections and get the best people. And then the other shipping lines that also take in our students will get the rest of the students. As Jonas said, RMU is an attractive proposition because we are regional in nature. And when you're dealing with our university, you're dealing with 5 African countries and 5 groups of African students as well.
Sorry to interrupt. We need to kind of wrap up so we can join the closing session. Oh, that's your closing slide. So I'll.
Yes, yes, please. So Jonas will take over and we'll conclude.
Yeah, thanks, Van Dijk.
Muted. Sorry, you are muted.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So if you look at these 2 examples or cases that we have presented, we could see we have some observations concerning the power issue. So the degree of power we explain as the autonomy that is given to the institution. Sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's skewed towards one of the institutions. And these 2 cases show that there may be a problem, not probably just with RMU, but with other institutions that have had opportunity of funding, that the institution themselves may not have the capacity to manage what they've been given in terms of the capacity of the officers or the lecturers or whoever is responsible for the training, or in negotiating the agreement, you might not have the requisite capacity to negotiate what is favorable to you. So what this shows is that when the other part, the industry partner, was much more active in the partnership, we saw good results. But when it was left to the institution alone, then the results were quite abysmal. So the World Bank report was really damning because RME was not the only institution who was giving these funds. There were other institutions like Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. There was Kikam Technical University in the Western region that was also giving the same facility but they did better than we did. It may be due to certain reasons. One of the reasons could be also that these were oil and gas related facilities. RMU is a maritime institution, but these two industries have synergies. And so some of the lab equipment and facilities could be used also for maritime training. And that is why we think that RMU could have done better. But aside that, the operational principles of the ISPs, basically, we deviated from them. There was no commitments. There was no capacity in that regard to be able to achieve the results that we anticipated. On the part of the main partner, the Petroleum Commission, I think that we came to a conclusion that what they did seemed almost like a social responsibility. So they just donated the equipment and then stayed back. But as an institution that was mandated by government to ensure that there's capacity building for the oil industry in Ghana, they should have gone beyond just donating the facilities to the institution. I mean, the World Bank report showed that the awareness of risk was already there. There was a risk of utilization, there was a risk of maintenance, and then there was the risk of certification. And I think they could have helped much better even in the certification realm, because they had all the relationship with a lot of the certified institutions in US and in other places, in other developed countries. So they could have helped in that regard. But by the time RMU realized they couldn't do the training because they were not certified. The certification is not just for the trainers, but it's also for the equipment. And so it's a very long process. So within the 2 years where this report came out, they were expecting that by then the certification would have been done and then the training would have started. But it looks like there was no clear policies regarding that relationship. And so we say that the degree of power was more skewed towards RMU, and they didn't know what to do with all that they've been given. So to end it, we see that a lot of the initiatives from the government side, we would see this kind of situation that happened to RMU happening. Even if you go back to Ghana's implementation of the junior high school system, that was the aim, to get more people to be able to learn skills with their hands. But it was at a policy level promoted, but in the institutions, it didn't take off really well. And most of us went through that system and still do not have any proper skills that was anticipated by the policy. So I think oversight responsibility over the institutions or these policies is probably also lacking. How do the TVET institutions also identify the right partners based on complementary resources? These are questions that we ask. And then how do we negotiate the most fruitful contracts? We find that a lot of opportunities for partnerships come our way, even in the Regional Maritime University. As lecturers there, we sometimes feel frustrated. The management would not accept or talk to a willing partner and so on and so forth. But I mean, we do not know what goes on there, but it appears that we might not have that capacity. We do not have that capacity to be able to negotiate these fruitful contracts and then move the partnership forward to bring in the results that we need. So these are perspectives that we glean from the cases that we have. If you look at our paper that has been posted on the African Knows platform, you would see that there are several other partnerships that we have entered into, and all of these have varied levels of success or failure, which we can talk about. But these two are key in deciding whether the partnerships are successful or not. We'll be happy to answer any questions or further clarifications. Thank you.
So thank you so much for this really excellent presentation. It really brought together all the different threads that we have been discussing all afternoon. So this industry school partnership model that you mentioned really is at the heart of what we're discussing. And I think those 4 points that you included in your last slide are really the kind of policy questions that need to be answered. You mentioned the power and autonomy and how that is the needle on the scale. So, we've spoken today about the knowledge gap, about mismatch, about the need for evidence-based market-driven curricula. We've spoken about attitudinal change. We've spoken about the need to develop the infrastructure that will support TVET, that interface with industry. We've spoken about entrepreneurship supports systems. So I would like to say, I mean, there are a lot of ideas out there, and I think we have defined the problem to some degree. And it would be nice to have a couple of concrete recommendations. We cannot do it now, but some concrete recommendations, if you would be so kind as to, if you reflect on what we've discussed today and you have some actionable points, I would really encourage you to please send them in so we can put a list of actionable points or recommendations in the report that will be posted and that's sent to the conference organizers. We have run out of time, so I am going to have to keep this very short, but I would like to say a very, very big thank you to our excellent speakers today, starting with Abidemi Olatumboso, who is not here, but who sent in some very good questions, to Samir Safar and Armand, to Diana van der Stelt and her team, to Abiodun Odunuga, to Rotimi Olawale, who has had to leave, to Jonas, Aryee, George Van Dyke, Torben, to all of you, I'd like to say thank you for making this a meaningful discussion. I think we've all gained a lot, and I really am very sincerely grateful for your taking the time and trouble to make this contribution. Thank you very much. We shall be getting in touch with the report. You've shared the slides already, but all of this information will be available on the conference website. I would like to encourage you now to please join the plenary so we can wrap up this very excellent Africa Knows conference. Indeed, Africa does know. Now let's make it actionable. Have a good evening to everyone. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.